Somewhere above your head, at this very moment, something is circling the Earth. It does not belong to any government. It was not launched by any space agency. It carries no registration, no flag, no known point of origin. And according to some of the most compelling, unsettling, and deeply debated claims in the history of space exploration, it has been up there, silently watching, drifting, orbiting for approximately 13,000 years. Not decades, not centuries. 13,000 years, long before the first human civilization scratched symbols into wet clay. Long before we learned to smelt bronze or build monuments or wonder at the stars. Whatever this object is, if it truly exists, it was placed in orbit around our planet at a time when most of humanity was still huddled in caves, hunting mammoth across frozen tundra, and had no concept of the cosmos beyond what they could see with the naked eye on a clear night. The object has a name, or rather, it has been given a name, whispered across decades of speculation and wonder and fear. It is called the Black Knight satellite, and its story, depending on who you ask, is either the greatest unsolved mystery in human history, or one of the most elaborate, persistent, and fascinating misunderstandings the modern world has ever produced. If this kind of story pulls at something deep inside you, the kind of story that makes you question everything you think you know about what is up there, watching, then you are exactly in the right place. If you have not already, take a moment right now to like this piece. Share it with someone who loves a good mystery. And if you are new here, subscribe. Because the universe has no shortage of secrets and we are only just beginning to pull back the curtain. Now, let us go back. Way, way back to where all of this begins, not in a NASA control room or a government archive, but in the crackling, static-filled laboratory of one of the most brilliant and mysterious minds the human race has ever produced. It is the year 1899. Nikola Tesla, the Serbian-American inventor who had already given the world alternating current electricity and would later develop the foundations of wireless communication, was conducting experiments in his Colorado Springs laboratory. He was working with a specially designed receiver, attempting to detect atmospheric electrical activity and, some believe, to listen to the universe itself. What he claimed to hear shocked him to his core. In his own writings and notes, Tesla described picking up a series of rhythmic, repeating signals. Signals that did not behave like anything produced by lightning, by human technology, or by any natural source he could identify. The signals had a pattern. They had structure. And they seemed, to Tesla's extraordinary and sometimes eccentric mind, to be intelligent in origin. He initially speculated they might be coming from Mars, a popular subject of scientific imagination at the time. But whatever he believed he had heard, he published his findings and moved on. And the world largely dismissed the claims as the overreach of a brilliant but increasingly isolated genius. For decades, those strange signals Tesla described were footnotes in the broader biography of a complicated man. But they did not disappear. Instead, they became seeds that would eventually, after years of accumulation, germination, and the slow addition of new and equally strange data points, grow into the mythology of the Black Knight. Because Tesla was not the last person to claim that something unusual was speaking to humanity from the darkness above. In 1928, Jørgen Hals, a Norwegian radio engineer working near Oslo, was assisting with radio wave experiments when he and his colleagues began detecting something deeply peculiar. They were sending out radio signals and measuring their echoes. A routine part of radio research, but some of the echoes were coming back with enormous, inexplicable delays. Some signals returned after several seconds, even minutes. Some were delayed by hours. These became known as long-delayed echoes, or LDEs, and they remain, to this day, a phenomenon that science has not fully and satisfactorily explained. Some researchers would later suggest the most exotic possibility, that the signals were being reflected or retransmitted by something in orbit. Something that was receiving, holding, and returning transmissions as though deliberately responding, or perhaps cataloging. The idea was wild. It was also, to certain minds, impossible to entirely dismiss. Around this same period, Scottish author Duncan Lunan claimed to have decoded the long-delayed echoes that Hulse and his colleagues had been recording since the late 1920s. Lunan, working in the early 1970s, published an analysis in which he suggested that plotting the delay times of these echoes against their sequence numbers produced a recognizable star map, specifically a map of the constellation Botes as it would have appeared approximately 13,000 years ago. He interpreted this as a message, a kind of cosmic calling card left by a probe that had been sent to our solar system millennia ago and had been broadcasting ever since, waiting for humanity to develop the technological sophistication to notice and decode it. The star Epsilon Botis, in his interpretation, was the probe's point of origin. Lunan eventually retracted parts of his analysis, acknowledging flaws in his methodology. And the scientific community was largely skeptical from the beginning. But the number 13,000 and the idea of an ancient probe in orbit sending deliberate signals had now entered the cultural conversation permanently. The Black Knight had found its mythology. Then came the photographs. In 1998, during the STS-AT-8 mission, NASA's first assembly mission to the International Space Station, astronaut Jerry Ross and James Newman conducted spacewalks to connect the first two components of the ISS. During these activities, photographers aboard the shuttle captured a sequence of images showing a dark, irregular object against the blackness of space. The object appeared roughly rectangular, angular, dark, unlike anything that was supposed to be up there. NASA's explanation was immediate and consistent. The object was a thermal blanket, a piece of debris that had become detached from the mission equipment during the spacewalks. Several images were taken. The debris drifted and the matter was considered closed. But the photographs, particularly when taken out of sequence and viewed without context, were astonishing. Against the cold geometry of space, the object looked deliberate. It looked constructed. It looked to thousands of people who would later see the images circulated across the early internet, like something that did not belong to the 20th century. The Black Knight had its face. Here is where the story begins to split, and honestly, it is where it becomes most interesting, because the divergence tells us as much about human psychology as it does about space. On one side, you have the researchers, the engineers, the skeptics. The scientists who look at the 1998 photographs and see exactly what NASA says they see. A mylar thermal blanket, roughly 1 meter across, tumbling in low Earth orbit, catching sunlight at angles that make it appear mysterious. They point to the cataloged debris field that surrounds Earth, a field containing hundreds of thousands of tracked objects and millions of smaller CZ-80s, and millions of smaller CZ-80s. And why smaller spleened-looking debris is not in itself evidence of extraterrestrial engineering. They reference the documented history of the Black Knight story and trace it back not to any single physical object, but to a convergence of separate, unrelated events that were gradually stitched together by enthusiasts over decades. Tesla's 1899 signals, the 1928 LDEs, the 1960 polar orbiting objects, Lunan's star map theory, and the 1998 STS-288 photographs. These events, the skeptics argue, have no proven connection to each other. They were produced by different people in different eras using different technologies, and were simply merged into a single narrative because the human mind is extraordinarily good at finding patterns and constructing stories, even when the underlying data does not support them. On the other side, you have those who find the convergence itself to be the most compelling part of the mystery. Because they do not see 5 unrelated events, they see 5 independent data points that all gesture toward the same possibility that something has been in Earth's orbit for a very long time, something that does not belong to us, something that watches. They ask reasonable questions that deserve reasonable answers. If the 1960 polar orbiting objects were simply misidentified debris or natural objects, why were they tracked by the US Navy with enough seriousness to generate official reports? If Tesla's signals were purely atmospheric or terrestrial in origin, why did he, a man of extraordinary technical precision, explicitly describe them as structured and repeating in ways that natural phenomena did not explain? If Luhn's star map analysis was purely coincidental, why does the mathematical result point to a real star system and a specific historical moment 13,000 years ago? The skeptics have answers to all of these questions, and those answers are coherent and well-reasoned. But the believers note that coherent and well-reasoned is not the same as proven. And in the space between proof and mystery, the Black Knight lives. There is something else that the conspiracy narrative leans into heavily. And it is worth addressing directly because it shapes how many people receive this story. The idea of institutional suppression. The argument goes that organizations like NASA, the US Department of Defense, and various intelligence agencies are aware of the Black Knight's existence and have been actively concealing it from the public for decades, releasing cover stories, thermal blankets, misidentified satellites, classified projects to prevent a disclosure that would destabilize human civilization. This theory has deep roots in the broader culture of government secrecy that the Cold War generated and that has never entirely dissolved. Governments did keep secrets. They classified projects, hid capabilities, and misled the public about what was happening in space. The existence of classified military satellites, spy platforms, and reconnaissance systems was concealed for years. So the infrastructure of secrecy is real. The question is whether that infrastructure is being used to hide a 13,000-year-old alien probe, or whether it is being used, as it usually is, to protect military and intelligence capabilities that have nothing to do with extraterrestrials. Carl Sagan, one of the most eloquent scientific communicators in history, had a phrase that is frequently invoked in discussions exactly like this one. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The claim that an alien object is orbiting Earth is, by any measure, extraordinary. The evidence that exists is ambiguous at best. Photographs of debris, disputed signal analyses, historical accounts filtered through decades of reinterpretation, and a star map derived from radio echo delays that the analyst himself partially retracted. That is not nothing, but it is also not extraordinary evidence. It is suggestive, intriguing, and worth continued inquiry, which is precisely why the story refuses to die. Because the best mysteries are not the ones with no evidence at all. They are the ones with just enough evidence to keep you up at night, turning possibilities over in your mind like stones in a river. What is perhaps most remarkable about the Black Knight narrative is how it has survived and evolved across the changing landscape of human knowledge and technology. In the 1960s, it was a mystery of the Cold War era, shaped by fear and secrecy. In the 1970s, it took on the color of the countercultural moment, becoming part of a broader questioning of establishment narratives. In the 1990s, the early internet gave it new life, connecting communities of believers and skeptics across geography and allowing the photographs from STS-288 to spread with a velocity that would have been impossible in earlier decades. And in the 21st century, as space exploration has entered a new era of private investment and commercial competition, the Black Knight has been pulled into a fresh context entirely. Today, SpaceX launches Falcon 9 rockets with a regularity that would have seemed like science fiction a generation ago. Elon Musk's Starlink constellation has placed thousands of satellites in low Earth orbit, transforming the night sky into something that astronomers and amateur stargazers alike struggle to recognize. The European Space Agency runs sophisticated debris tracking programs. The Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency and India's ISRO have both significantly expanded their orbital monitoring capabilities. The combined radar and optical tracking systems of the world's major space powers can detect objects in low Earth orbit with extraordinary precision. And yet, and this is a point that believers raise with considerable emphasis, none of these systems has produced a confirmed, cataloged, independently verified ancient satellite in polar orbit. The Black Knight, if it is up there, has remained invisible to all of humanity's most sophisticated tools for watching the sky. The skeptics say this is because it does not exist. The believers say this is because it is either too small, too dark, or too cleverly designed to be detected by instruments that were built by the very species it is designed to observe without being detected. This is, of course, a kind of unfalsifiability, a quality that critics of conspiracy theories frequently identify as a structural flaw. If no evidence can disprove the theory, then the theory is not really a scientific claim at all. It is a belief system. But the believers would counter that absence of detection is not the same as evidence of absence, and that our orbital tracking, while impressive, is far from complete. There are billions of cubic kilometers of space around Earth, and we are watching it with tools that, by cosmic standards, are extraordinarily crude and recent. There is also the question of what we mean when we talk about intelligent observation. The more extreme versions of the Black Knight theory do not merely suggest that an alien probe is in orbit. They suggest that it has been actively studying humanity for 13 millennia. Observing our development from nomadic hunters to agricultural civilizations to industrial empires to digital networks. The implication, sometimes stated and sometimes left hovering unspoken, is that this observation has been purposeful. That some intelligence, somewhere, sent a probe to our world at approximately the same time that the last ice age was ending and the first complex human societies were beginning to form, and has been watching the entire subsequent story of human civilization unfold. This is a thought that, if you allow yourself to sit with it for even a moment, is genuinely staggering in its implications. It means we have never been alone. It means the entire arc of human history, every war, every discovery, every moment of beauty and horror has been witnessed by something that is not us. It means that whatever we are, whatever we have become, something new, we were here before we knew ourselves. Whether or not that thought is supported by the available evidence, and the honest answer is that it is not. At least, not conclusively. It reveals something profound about why the Black Knight story resonates so powerfully across cultures, generations, and levels of scientific literacy. It speaks to one of the deepest questions the human mind can ask. Are we alone? That question predates space telescopes and radio receivers and quantum physics. It was asked by Aristotle, by Giordano Bruno, by Galileo, by every human being who has ever looked up at a sky full of stars and felt the dizzying, vertiginous weight of infinite possibility. The Black Knight, in its way, is an answer to that question, or at least it is a shape that the question takes when it falls to earth and becomes a story. And stories, as we know, are how human beings process what they cannot fully understand. We have always built narratives around the inexplicable, around the aurora borealis, around eclipses, around the sudden appearance of comets. We have always imagined watchers. We have always created myths that place intelligence in the sky, looking down. The Black Knight is, in this sense, a contemporary myth, a story assembled from the raw materials of the space age, from the specific anxieties and wonders of a civilization that has only just learned to leave its own planet and is only beginning to grasp the immensity of what lies beyond. It is a myth built not from ignorance, but from the leading edge of human knowledge, from the places where our instruments end and our imagination begins. Researchers like John Carlson and others in the field of archaeoastronomy have long noted that human beings have an innate tendency, sometimes called patternicity, to perceive meaningful patterns in random data. It is a cognitive trait that served our ancestors well in a world where recognizing the pattern of a predator's tracks could mean the difference between survival and death. But in a world of complex data, radio signals, and orbital photographs, that same trait can lead us to find order and intention in what is actually noise and coincidence. This does not mean the Black Knight signals were noise. It means we cannot be certain they were not. What we can say with certainty is this: the space around Earth is not empty. It is filled with debris, with active satellites, with fragments of old missions, with natural micrometeoroids, and with objects whose origins are uncertain or disputed. we can say that the history of the Black Knight narrative is a genuine document of human curiosity and the way that curiosity interacts with secrecy, technology, and the deep, irresistible pull of the unknown. We can say that the photographs from STS-288 are real photographs of a real object, whatever that object turns out to be. And we can say that the questions Tesla asked in 1899, questions about intelligence beyond our world, about signals in the static, about what else might be listening and speaking in the frequencies we are only just learning to hear, are questions that science has not yet definitively answered. Not because scientists are hiding the answers, but because the universe is genuinely, staggeringly, almost incomprehensibly vast, and we are very small, and we have been looking for a very short time. If you have followed this story to this point, if you have traveled with it from Tesla's crackling Colorado laboratory through the Cold War silence and the dawn of the Internet age, and into the crowded orbital highways of the 21st century, then you understand why the Black Knight refuses to be dismissed and refuses to be confirmed. It exists in exactly the space where all the best mysteries live, at the boundary between what we know and what we suspect, between what the evidence shows and what the imagination demands. That space is not comfortable. It is not meant to be. It is the space where curiosity lives, and where, if history is any guide, the next great discovery is always quietly forming. Before we close this chapter of the story, take a moment to do something that costs you almost nothing but means everything to the continuation of conversations like this one. Like this piece, if it made you think. Share it with someone who asks big questions. Subscribe if you want to keep following the thread of mysteries that the universe has woven through every corner of human history. And leave a comment. Tell us what you believe, whether you think the Black Knight is an ancient alien probe or a misidentified piece of space debris or something in between. Because your voice is part of this story too, and stories need witnesses. They always have. Whatever orbits above us tonight, debris or dream, thermal blanket or 13,000-year-old messenger, the act of looking up and asking the question is itself something extraordinary. In a universe that appears, from all available evidence, to be mostly cold and empty and indifferent, the fact that we look up at all, that we build instruments and launch rockets and tune our receivers to the frequencies of the void and ask, quietly and persistently, is anyone there? That fact alone is remarkable. Maybe the most remarkable thing about us. And maybe, just maybe, something up there has noticed. Disclaimer. This article is based on theories, popular legends, disputed historical accounts, and unverified claims surrounding the so-called Black Knight satellite. The content has been created for educational and entertainment purposes only. It does not represent established scientific fact, confirmed historical record, or the official position of any space agency, scientific institution, or government body. Readers and viewers are encouraged to consult peer-reviewed scientific sources for verified information about 2.4. Information about 2/orbital, environment, and the history of space exploration.